Hello, Tactical Edge. Thank you for coming to my talk, and thank you for the organizers and the sponsors that have been able to put such a fantastic event together. My name is Jorge Orchilles, and we are going to be talking about purple teaming, really showing efficiencies and value when we do adversary emulation by combining the red team and the blue team, having them work together for bringing value and improving the security posture. So a little bit about myself. I am the Chief Technology Officer at SCYTHE, an organization that has an adversary emulation platform, both for red teaming and purple teaming. So this is very close to my heart. And I've also published a free framework called the Purple Team Exercise Framework. It goes through quite a few of the things we're going to cover here so that you can have and build a purple team program to better your security posture much quicker. I'm also the co-creator of the C2 matrix. It's a matrix of command and control frameworks that are often used by red teams and now blue teams and purple teams as well to test yourself, because a lot of adversaries are also using some of these tools. Prior to SCYTHE, I worked at Citigroup for 10 years. I started as a vulnerability assessment analyst and worked my way through creating the penetration testing program there and the red team and then the purple team function. So a lot of experience at a large corporation. I am a SANS certified instructor teaching the penetration testing curriculum, Security 560, which trains you up for the GPEN, and the incident handling course, Security 504. I'm also the author of a 2-day SANS course called Security 564, Red Team Exercises and Adversary Emulation. I told you, I really like this stuff. I was on the working group for the Common Vulnerability Scoring System. We released version 3 and 3.1 is the most recent. Now I'm working on the Exploitability Prediction System to figure out which of those vulnerabilities will most likely get exploited first so that we prioritize them. I've created a pen testing framework with the Global Financial Markets Association, and I'm a big fan of ISSA, the Information Systems Security Association. I'm honored to have been given the fellow designation. I'm also a technologist fellow for the National Security Institute. A long time ago, I wrote a book on Windows 7, so hopefully no one's using Windows 7 anymore and people stop buying the book. So, purple teaming. How hard can it be? We're bringing the red team that does offense and the blue team that does defense together into a virtual team, right? Can't possibly be that hard. Well, this is how we think will go. We think that everyone, once we get back to our offices and can have meetings in person, are all going to be smiles and they're going to be collaborating. It's all going to be a great work environment, right? But this is actually how it might go, because if you have a red team and they haven't cared about the blue team, and they should obviously, but if they didn't, then you might actually have an adversarial relationship, which you'll need to foster and improve. So what is a purple team? A purple team is a virtual team where the following different functions come together. First, your cyber threat intelligence. Whether it's an internal or an external team, you need to understand your threat landscape, your attack surface, and who's likely to attack you. If you know what adversaries are likely to attack you, then you can understand their tactics, techniques, and procedures of how that attack will work. For example, Garmin was recently attacked and had a ransomware attack. If that's something that you think might target you, then understanding that attack would be very useful for you. And that way you can emulate that attack inside your organization. The red team is the offensive team. They're the ones that emulate the attack in these TTPs that were provided by the cyber threat intelligence team. And the blue team is the defenders. So rarely do you actually call it a blue team, but sometimes you call them the Security Operations Center analysts. Maybe you have a hunt team or digital forensics and incident response team, or even a managed security service provider. Really, the defenders are the blue team. One thing that I saw recently is this IBM cost of data breach, and the report came out just a couple weeks ago. And interesting tidbit on there is the average cost saving when an organization has an incident response team and they actually test the team was $2 million. So imagine that. We've seen just the last couple of weeks, we saw Garmin mention they could have paid up to $10 million. We're not exactly sure how much they paid, but also CWT paid $4 million in ransomware. So these numbers are quite high. And if you can train and have an incident response team and do some of this testing, you're going to save a significant amount of money. So how does a purple team work from a high level? And this is what we're going to dive into today. Pretty much a lot of preparation, which we'll cover, but the cyber threat intelligence team or an exercise coordinator or even the red team will present an adversary. This adversary is likely to attack our organization. These are the tactics, techniques, and procedures that they are likely to do, and these are some more technical details. Then the attendees have a tabletop discussion of what security controls they think they have. Well, something's coming in through phishing. We think that we have this great spam filter, or our email security will block that. The red team will then test this out here on step 3. The blue team will then go and see, they'll follow their processes and see if they can detect this. If they do, they share their screen. So the blue team's learning from the red team as they emulate the attack, and then the red team's learning from the blue team as they show all their logs and their SIMs and their forensics tools, etc. Then we document what worked and what didn't. If any adjustments can be made, they can be done on the fly, tested those out, and repeat that same TTP. Anything that will require a longer term solution will get documented and assigned to lessons learned. And then you go through all these different steps over and over, because a particular adversary is not just going to do one little thing, they're going to do these attack chains. So you go through those. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. Now, I mentioned the Purple Team Exercise Framework. This is a free framework you can download right now at scythe.io/ptef. And it's about a 20-page document that will allow you to implement this in your organization and show value and really measure your people, process, and technology, and then improve it in an efficient way. So what's our agenda? We're first going to start with the evolution of ethical hacking, because adversary emulations and doing purple team exercises has really grown through from where we started, which was doing vulnerability assessment. So we're going to cover that. Then we're going to cover the goals of doing adversary emulations as purple team exercises. We'll, of course, introduce a framework and methodology. You can see that here. We'll have roles and responsibilities. We'll cover cyber threat intelligence, the attack infrastructure, which is part of the preparation, the team preparation before the exercise, the kickoff, the actual exercise flow, and then doing lessons learned. So here we go. The ethical hacking maturity model. Now, this is based on my experience and experiences in organizations where I've worked, as well as speaking to students over the past 10 years that I've taught SANS, mostly in the penetration testing curriculum, of how they've matured. So this isn't necessarily a step-by-step guide where you have to do one before the other, but some organizations have done it this way, some have not. So, and that is, we started with vulnerability scanning, right? Everyone has some vulnerability scanner somewhere, that a Nessus, a Nexpose, a Qualys, and they point their vulnerability scanner to a range of IP addresses, maybe some web applications, and you hit go. And that will send a number of different packets across, will test, and based on the responses, will give you a nice long report. That report doesn't really know much about your organization, doesn't know from where you were scanning from. Was it across the internet? Was it on the internal network? Were you authenticated? Were you not authenticated? So vulnerability assessment kind of came into the picture, where we had analysts actually looking at these vulnerability scanning results and providing a prioritized list of what you needed to fix. And I've done a lot of work here, right, with the common vulnerability scoring system, making sure that we have scores. And really important about the common vulnerability scoring system is the base score is given to you by the vendor, but it's up to the vulnerability assessment analyst to actually calculate the environmental and the temporal score, which will give you the score for your environment and where those systems are. And that way you can prioritize a lot better. So that's a little more manual. Then we had penetration testing, where security analysts would now exploit the vulnerabilities that they found. And that's a big difference between verifying a vulnerability and actually exploiting it. Exploiting the vulnerability means you get access to that system. And from there, you can better calculate business risk, as well as prove that indeed that vulnerability does exist. Now, penetration testing, depending on the scope and the rules of engagement, may allow you to move laterally through the organization, but we've seen a lot of regulations really scoping down those pen tests, saying that only a particular set of IP addresses need to be scanned, or once you get access to that SQL server with your SQL injection exploit, that you can't go much further. That's kind of where red teaming started coming into the picture. It comes from the military term, and this is actually emulating and testing tactics, techniques, and procedures against not only technology, but people, process, and technology. So things like social engineering are part of red team engagements. Even tabletop exercises can be a form of red teaming. Purple teaming is now when we bring the red team and the blue team together. See, vulnerability scanning, vulnerability assessment, pen testing, and red team engagements all result in a report. And the blue team, or the defenders, don't know about most of this until the end, once they get this report. Purple teaming brings the blue team into this early on. That way they're aware of everything that's going on. And lastly, adversary emulation, which the last two that we're going to talk about is purple teaming and adversary emulation, is the discipline of looking at your cyber threat intelligence and leveraging that to emulate an adversary just like they've attacked other organizations. Of course, there's an arrow here at the end. That means that there will be other things. My call to action here is to continue evolving. Just because you're doing maybe red teaming doesn't mean you stop doing vulnerability scanning, right? So don't stop doing the previous ones as you mature. So let's dive a little deeper here. First of all, the red team. What is the definition of the red team? They're going to test assumptions. They are the practice of looking at a problem or situation from the perspective of an adversary. And the goal here is to make the blue team better, to train and measure whether blue team has the people, the process, and technology to detect and respond and attack. Now, the effort here is pretty manual. You can't really automate a red team per se, right? That you need someone actually looking and understanding the organization, thinking it through. But the bigger difference is the customer here is the blue team, as opposed to a pen test where the customer is generally the operations team that owns that technology, because you might only be looking at a particular smaller scope. The blue team, as I mentioned, are the defenders of an organization. Really, I would argue that it's everyone's responsibility. Even if someone in accounting or HR that sees a malicious email come in, maybe it didn't get stopped by the technology, they are people. They should report that to the Security Operations Center and say, look, this phishing email got through and it looks bad. So really, blue team is all the defenders in an organization. The goal here is to identify, contain, and eradicate the attack. The effort is pretty manual, and the frequency is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because attacks never stop. Adversary emulation is a type of red team engagement, where the red team will emulate how an adversary operates, following the same tactics, techniques, and procedures based on that realistic threat. So it does leverage cyber threat intelligence, which is very important here. And the goal is to emulate an adversary attack or scenario. And the customer is the entire organization. Now, a lot of these things are going to be manual. We've actually found a way where we can automate some of the attacker behaviors. But of course, you're not automating the entire process, because as you will see, it is a program. It's a process. It's not just a technology that's going to solve this. Now, I do want to note the difference between internal and external teams, not only from the red team side, which is generally what most organizations have. Not everyone has an internal red team, but this also applies to, say, internal cyber threat intelligence versus having a vendor. And a blue team. Some organizations have a managed security service provider, which would technically be an external team. Now, there's pros and cons to each of these. From the red team perspective, if you have an internal team, you're going to be doing repeated engagements. You're going to find a lot of the same things over and over until those are fixed. You're going to be spending a lot of time retesting. You're also going to have a lot of insider knowledge. So what the internal red teams really should be acting as is as a sparring partner with the blue team, where you're not knocking them down, but you're working together. As one gets better, so does the other. External teams are a little different. They're going to offer a new perspective because they don't have that insider knowledge. They may have different industry experience, and they're going to come in and do a snapshot engagement, generally resulting in a report that they were able to create based on the time that they were allowed to do this testing. So let's move towards a purple team, that sparring partner. Whether it's an internal or an external team, you want red and blue working together because it's going to bring a lot of efficiency, as I've been doing this for a long time. And just doing the red team exercise is great, but it takes longer to resolve things and improve things than when you're doing it as a purple team engagement. So purple team has goals, right? And those goals will really set off how you do this purple team engagement. So you might want to test a particular attack chain against your organization, or see if a particular threat actor would be able to get in, and really answer that question that when we see things like Garmin or CWT get ransomed, we always get asked, right, by our senior management is, can this happen to us? Well, it's one of the things that we're going to be able to answer here. We can test processes, we can test people, and we can test technology. And by doing it all at the same time, we're going to be able to foster this collaborative culture within your security organization. So we always start with frameworks and methodologies, because if you're regulated, you're going to have to show that you follow an industry framework. And if you're not, it's a great way to sell this program and say, look, this is what other organizations are doing. So for this case, we have the purple team exercise framework that it's based on a reviewed by various people in the industry that have done this in large organizations and as consulting as well. And it covers a cycle that's very similar to some of the other frameworks, right? Where we start with cyber threat intelligence, then we do preparation, exercise execution, and then lessons learned. The first real framework, I guess, that came out was Lockheed Martin. This came out and it was 7 steps. I'm sure you've heard of this, right? This actually got a lot of senior management to kind of understand how an attack worked. But those 7 steps really only focus on that initial access. And then once you get access into the internal network, it just jumps to action on objectives. So Paul Poles, shout out to him, did a paper for the university where he was studying called the Unified Cyber Kill Chain, which really brought together not only the cyber kill chain from Lockheed Martin, but a number of other ones. Now, if you're in the financial space and you're global, you've definitely heard of some of these other regulations. These are more focused on red team exercises that are adversary emulation. So they're more zero knowledge engagements. However, if you look at the frameworks, you can do them as purple teams as well. And that's the Bank of England has CBEST, intelligence-led testing. The European Central Bank has TIBER EU, which stands for Threat Intelligence-Based Ethical Red Teaming. Monetary Authority of Singapore has the Red Team Adversary Attack Simulation exercises. The Monetary Authority of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority has intelligence-led cyber attack simulations. And then the Global Financial Markets Association came across, I was one of the authors of this one, and it's a framework for the regulatory use of pen testing in the financial services industry. And really what we wanted to do there was create one framework that would meet the spirit of all these other country-based regulations so that we could achieve cross-region regulations. So all of those are great. Really, I built the purple team exercise framework from my experiences writing some of these red team ones, right? Because really the only difference is in purple teaming, instead of being zero knowledge, the other teams know about it. And then for the testing framework, we have MITRE ATT&CK, which stands for Adversary Tactics, Techniques, and Common Knowledge. This is really the industry standard. I'm sure you've seen this before. On the top row, we have the tactics. Those are the adversary goals. High level, initial access. They want to get in. They want to execute their code inside. Then they want to escalate privileges, steal some credentials, move laterally, collect information, exfiltrate that, or cause some sort of impact, right? So those are the high-level goals, known as the tactics. Then we have the techniques. Those are the boxes under there. And the techniques are how those goals are achieved. And then we have the procedures, where if you click on any of these, it will show you how various different adversaries have used that technique to achieve their goal. So a part of being a common knowledge, that's what the CK at the end stands for. I would argue that this is a common language. It has allowed an organization that gets compromised to have forensics works done, and then they provide it back through cyber threat intelligence saying this is what occurred. And then the blue team and the defenders and the red team can all understand what occurred and then emulate that. So it's a very good framework for learning how to do and how attacks work, but also to collaborate. And that's why we call it out when we talk about adversary emulation. So if we're going to do a purple team exercise, we need roles and responsibilities. That way everyone knows what's going on, right? So the head of security, for instance, maybe the chief information security officer, the head of global security, etc. They're going to be a sponsor. Their responsibility is going to be approve this purple team exercise and approve the budget. Then cyber threat intelligence. They're going to provide the cyber threat intelligence of a malicious actor that has the capability, opportunity, and intent to attack your target organization, and then give you the tactics, techniques, and procedures that the red team will emulate while the blue team tries to hunt down. Then we have the red team and the blue team managers. They're also sponsors because they need to define the goals. They need to select which attendees are going to attend and be carried out of their day-to-day job to get to this training. You have your red team, which is the one emulating the offensive part. And then you have your blue team, which are, again, all the defenders. They're also part of the exercise because they're going to be following their own processes to identify the attacks that you've done. And then a project manager. I highly encourage you to have a project manager whose role is to be the exercise coordinator. This will be the lead point of contact throughout the entire purple teaming exercise. This person should be able to interact with the head of security, with the cyber threat intelligence team, with the managers of the red and blue team, also be there during the exercise, take notes, highlight action items, get feedback, send daily emails. It's a very important role, and you should definitely have someone that's dedicated to it. So the sponsors, they need to approve this exercise. They are the ones that need to see value. Now, most organizations might hear about purple team exercises, like all of you are, in a conference or see that it's an efficient way of doing adversary emulation, but don't really have any data around that. So the first exercise is always a little tough. However, once you do your first exercise, I'm confident you'll be able to show that value. And at the end of the day, the sponsor needs to approve the budget, right? You're getting people out of their day-to-day for a day, maybe 2 days, 3 days, depending how long of the exercise you're going to run. And that requires money, right? If maybe you don't have a red team, you might need some money. Or if you don't have tools, you might need to purchase an enterprise platform for emulating adversaries. And the blue team, of course, if the blue team is an internal, then that's going to cost a little more. The cyber threat intelligence team is an internal. So you have a lot of areas to consider there. And then you are going to have members of various teams out of their business as usual role, right? Their BAU. They're not going to be doing their day-to-day work, which means that the managers need to account for that and plan it out. So all of these managers will be part of the sponsors as well as they select what attendees are going to be part of this exercise. Time requirements. So in my experience, purple team exercises generally run from a few hours on a day to up to 5 days. I rarely see them running for any longer than this. Once you get past that 5 day, you kind of operationalize this, but we're not there yet. Preparation time is based on the goals and the guidance, and you're going to see that preparation actually is what takes the longest. That's really our main thing we're going to cover today, is how to prep. Because once we get to the day of the exercise, things move very, very quickly. And then, of course, you have your lessons learned, and generally you want that lessons learned report within 2 weeks after the exercise concludes. So let's start with cyber threat intelligence. We need to understand our target organization to then be able to identify an adversary that has the capability, the intent, and the opportunity to attack your organization. So if you're in the financial industry space, there's a number of different threat groups, right? A lot of them are known as the fin groups that are likely to attack you. If you are someone like Garmin, you were being attacked by someone like Evil Corp, which is the name of that threat group. That is what the threat intelligence should say. These particular groups are the ones attacking us. Once you know what groups are attacking you based on your industry, your region, etc., you gather threat intelligence. So the cyber threat intelligence analyst goes out and grabs information, could be open source, could be from vendors, and then you need to extract and focus on the tactics, techniques, and procedures, because these are the attacker behaviors that are going to be emulated by the red team. You then analyze and organize those TTPs, map them to MITRE ATT&CK, for instance, and then you create a plan. And that plan is what will get approved, and you won't be running around on the day of the exercise not sure of what's going on. So there's many different types of threat intelligence. This is David Bianco's pyramid of pain. He is an incident responder, and we can start at the bottom here, where traditionally antivirus, right? If there is a piece of malware that's bad, we generally get its hash value and add it as a signature to your antivirus. So identifying something like that is pretty easy, right? What about an IP address or a domain name? Well, if you identify that a particular domain name or IP is bad, you should be able to block that pretty quickly, whether it's on the endpoint or on your outbound proxy or on a firewall. But as we get up to the top of that pyramid, we start talking about the tools used by the adversaries, and the toughest one of all, the TTPs, the tactics, techniques, and procedures. These are the behaviors that the attackers have, and those are tough to catch, as well as tough for the adversary to modify. So here's an example of extracting TTPs. We have a paragraph from a FireEye report saying that there was a payload in an auto IT downloader that downloaded and executed PowerShell from a particular IP address. So just this one line tells us about a software product, auto IT, tells us about a technique, PowerShell. It tells us an IP address, as well as a protocol where it used HTTPS, as well as port 8080. So just one sentence here has given us quite a bit of threat intelligence, right? The IP address, that's not going to be that important to us from the adversary emulation perspective, because we're not going to steal that IP address. But we definitely care about that TTP. That technique of PowerShell is something we're going to want to emulate. As you read through here, you'll see other tools such as Puppy, PowerSploit, Mimikatz, and you'll see other TTPs such as credential dumping and stealing and doing exploitation for privilege escalation. So this is what you have to do for the entire report of cyber threat intelligence to extract this and map it out to MITRE ATT&CK. An excellent tool is the ATT&CK Navigator. This year, same MITRE ATT&CK. This one has sub-techniques, which were just released last month. Actually, probably about a month old today, actually. So this is a web app. You can also install this in your own environment, and it allows you to choose various adversaries or tools. You can see here in red, we've chosen a particular threat actor that has done these various things. So in this case, we've taken the TTPs and now we've organized them and really mapped them back to MITRE ATT&CK, which allows us to create a plan. So we're going to analyze and organize these. I like doing a little table because it's a lot easier to read than that MITRE ATT&CK matrix. And here we have the description of the adversary. We have the adversary objective. So if we're looking at something like Evil Corp, right? Evil Corp's objective was to drop the wasted locker ransomware and ransom off the access to the company. There's other threat actors that their goal might be to continue to have a foothold in the organization and then sell that access, right? All of these are going to matter based on the description, the objective of the threat actor that was chosen. And then we have our tactics, command and control, generally one of the first things you're going to have to set up if you're a red teamer. Then initial access, execution, etc. So let's take a look at APT33. So looking at who attends Tactical Edge, I chose this threat actor because they are an Iranian threat group. And Iranian threat groups really became quite the talking point after the January assassination of Soleimani. So a lot of CISOs were asking, what can the Iranians do to us if they target us in the cyberspace? Well, in this case, we learned what APT33 does and how they operate, how they do command and control, how they gain initial access, and you see it's all mapped. So just this one pager shows an attack chain of about 15 or so TTPs that we can then emulate in our Purple Team exercise. Now, you can't just simply say, let's do all of these without really tabletopping it first. The planning phase is really important. So you know your adversary, you know the TTPs that they're going to use, but now you want to look and only do TTPs that really matter. If you choose TTPs that are not prevented, then that's a good thing. If you choose a TTP that's prevented, then you're not really going to train people or process because it was prevented by some sort of technology. So you want things that are allowed in, but are logged, detected, or alerted, because that is our focus on improving the people and process part, not just the technology. So how do we do this? Well, once we have this list of TTPs, we tabletop it with the managers. We get the red team manager, we get the blue team manager, the hunt team manager, and we say, okay, this is our first test case. We're going to send a phishing email, or we're going to run MIMICAT. And then the blue team says, all right, we should definitely be able to block that because our antivirus is going to catch MIMICATs. And then the hunt team will say, well, and if it doesn't catch it, we have all these logs that are being sent to our Splunk or our Elk or our SIM, and we'd be able to see it there. And then the DFIR folks, the incident response folks, and the forensicators will be able to say, oh, and if they run this, we'll be able to see that in memory if we extract the memory. Great. So you go through each one of these controls, test cases, and you talk about their expected control and expected visibility. That way you have an idea. Remember, a lot of what we're doing here is testing assumptions. Now, from the red team perspective, you need to choose what tools you want to use. And this is a project that I created with Bryson Bohr and Adam Machinchi from SCYTHE. Before I joined, we were actually already working together on this open source and free tool, which is a list of all the command and control frameworks out there. Many of these are free. Actually, all of them, with the exception of 5, are open source or free that you can just download and use. So which one do you use? Well, it depends on what adversary you're going to emulate. And that's what we've created. There's a questionnaire where it allows you to choose which is the ideal tool for the particular adversary emulation you're doing. We've also grown. We're up to 54 command and controls as of right now, which is a ton of tools. We also have the how-to.c2 matrix, which shows you how to install some of these and run them, really to lower the learning curve because they're free and they're being used already. You should also know how they work. To make that even easier, we released the SANS Slingshot C2 Matrix Edition virtual machine that comes with 8 of these C2s already installed for you. That way you can get up and test as quick as possible. So this is a great tool for your red team to look at and say, okay, we're going to emulate this particular adversary, APT33, for example, with Empire, because all of what APT33 does can be done by Empire. So logistics. you need to pick a location. So with COVID, obviously you can't do this in person. I like the in-person, especially when you want to cultivate that collaborative culture. But given where we are, we might have to go virtual. So pick a platform to use: Zoom, GoToMeeting, WebEx, whatever it is, Teams, right? Not endorsing any of these. If it's a physical location, then generally where your security operations center is generally ideal, because less people have to travel. Obviously, if you travel, you need to get approval, you need to book travel, etc. Then you need to choose a training room or a large conference room. Do remember that a 8-person conference room doesn't actually fit 8 people with their laptops and everything else. So make sure there's ample space, there's ample power, because all of these systems are going to be plugged in, and there's enough air circulating as well. Obviously, all of this is going to change now with COVID and how we do things. But really, the point is that you want each attendee to be able to share their workstation live, because this is a hands-on exercise. So as the red team emulates their TTP, they're going to be showing it on the screen. Then maybe the security operations center analyst will be able to show how they detected that particular attack, and they should also be sharing the screen. This isn't only about the red team teaching or training the blue team, it's also the other way around, where the blue team is going to show things, and I've learned a lot from the blue team. So target systems. In this case, where we want to test people, process, and technology all at once, we need to test that in production. That is where all your tools are reporting into. That's where people and process exist. So how do we do that? Well, you provision new systems in production. That way, you have exactly what all the other systems have. So you have a real accurate representation, and they're reporting to the right location, right? So most of these attacks you're going to see start with end user systems. So get some endpoint operating systems. I recommend 2 of each in the event that you destroy one on accident. Maybe the red team does something that causes damage. That happened to us on our first one, and we were scrambling to get another system in short time. So get 2 systems of each, whether you use Windows, Linux, Mac. Gain physical systems as well as virtual systems, and if you use things like Citrix or terminal service or virtual desktop infrastructure, get those. Then have a couple server systems as well, whether you run Windows servers, Unix servers, cloud, virtual, etc. Get a few of those. Then make sure that they have all the production security tools, because the production security tools are going to report into the production logs and the production SIMs and all those production security tools. So make sure that you have your antivirus, anti-malware, anti-exploit, whatever next-gen name they have today. If you have an endpoint detection and response solution, which many organizations do, make sure that that's on there. Make sure that there's forensics tools to gain image acquisition or do live forensics. Remember, doing and pulling an image from a hard drive or from memory takes a little bit of time, so live forensics might go a long way. And then make sure that you also have network visibility, right? That these production systems are using the standard outbound channels to go out to the internet, maybe through a proxy, through a firewall, so you have all those logs. And then you're going to need accounts, because someone's going to click on something and it's going to get compromised, right? Just like in a real attack. So request a new account for a standard user. This actually might be harder than it sounds in some organizations, because there is no process to give someone a second account. So figure that out, and then make sure that that account also has an email address so that you can send emails in. If it's going to be phishing in any way, you're going to want that, and that they have internet access. That way you can test those outbound controls and you do some command and control. And then add those new accounts as local admins. This just makes it a lot easier for the red team. They don't have to try to do privilege escalation. We can assume that somehow they're going to be able to escalate privileges, and the focus shouldn't really be on that. And also, how hard is it to actually detect privilege escalation? Might be the case. So just consider this one. And then attack infrastructure. So if you're familiar with how red team operates, they have to do all of this stuff beforehand, right? They need to choose and procure an external hosting provider. I like using cloud environments like DigitalOcean, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. choose whichever provider you like, and then create systems on there. Make sure to do operational security. Only allow connecting to that system from the IP addresses of the red teamers. Set up any phishing sites or payload delivery sites, so when someone goes to that site, they get sent whichever malicious payload you're going to try based on the TTPs you've selected. Set up the command and control infrastructure so that you have communication to those systems that you've compromised. And you might need to set up redirectors and relays to go and bounce through various different cloud environments before they get to your command and control server. And then if you're going to send emails, you need to set up a shared email service. A lot of folks like using Google or Office 365, or you can set up your own SMTP servers as well, which would require a little bit more time for setting up and gaining reputation. Then you have to purchase domains. Most organizations don't allow access directly to an IP address, right? We can test that. And you also are going to want some TLS certificates, right? Some SSL. Set up domain fronting if it's one of the TTPs. Make sure that these domains are allowed outbound. So if you use anything like categorization on domains, for instance, you probably block things like pornography and guns and hacking. The same thing. You might want to purchase this domain and then categorize it as a health or financial services type domain. That way it can be accessed. And then you can provide all of this to the blue team ahead of time because this is a purple team engagement. Let them know we're setting up attack infrastructure here. Please add these IPs to the allow list. That way we can connect to it and we're not having to get around those controls. You can also do this internally or do both. Maybe set up on the internet to do the command and control testing, and then internally you do all the other TTPs. This requires setting up virtual machines internally. If you have a NAC solution, a network access control solution, then you might need to allow this system to connect to that network. And then the same thing, set up your command and control infrastructure and then test all of your payloads. Make sure that the payloads work when you run it on a target system that communicates back to your command and control server. Now for red team preparation. Also, always set up at least 2 systems to show the attack activity. This will allow, in the event that one system crashes, a laptop gets destroyed, you can share this information. Make sure that the attack infrastructure is fully functional, that you can connect to it, that you have all the commands and your playbooks documented. So this is one of the areas that requires a lot of prep work on the red team side. And that's because most of these C2 frameworks and the free ones that you're going to use are going to require you to copy and paste the same command, and hopefully it does the same testing reliably. This is one of the things that we do at SCYTHE, is that we allow you to create these scripts and these executables that will do the same thing over and over reliably in a safe manner. So here are some playbooks. In this case, we created some of these campaigns in SCYTHE beforehand. We have various different test cases. First of all, we have an executable that will run and establish an HTTP connection directly to an IP address. And there we see how we're going to execute that. Then we have another payload that will do HTTPS to an IP address every 5 seconds, but instead of being executed with bacon.exe, it will be executed with run-dll32, which is another technique called bacon.dll, and there's our runbook for that. And then we have HTTPS to a domain, a 5-second heartbeat. That means every 5 seconds it'll call out, and we're going to execute that with PowerShell. So very simple. When we use SCYTHE, we only need one slide to show various different test cases for use. Now the SOC team and the blue team preparation. They need to validate that the security tools are reporting on those new production systems and those production accounts that you created. You need to ensure the attack infrastructure is accessible. So the red team has already provided the domains and the IPs and everything they're going to connect to. So verify that that's working. And then you should have some sort of threat hunting playbook. If you don't, check out the threathunterplaybook.com by CyberWarDog. excellent for threat hunting. A little bit out of scope of what we're talking or what we're going to show here, but this is definitely something that you should have if you have a threat hunting team in your organization. Now, for the digital forensics and incident response folks, they will need to create an exercise case, right? Because you can't just take memory and do forensics on any system in the network. You need to have a case built around that. So go ahead and do that. Create it in your system. Make sure you tag it as an exercise, and that way you'll be able to pull information there. Then make sure that the forensics tools are deployed on the target system. What we've seen is a lot of organizations don't deploy the forensics tools on all systems. They might deploy it only when they need to pull information from it. And consider maybe using live forensic tools, such as running sysmon and looking at that straight on that system, or things like processmon and other sysinternal tools. Then we're up to our exercise. Here we have the kickoff. The kickoff should be a sponsor, maybe even the CISO, that brings everyone together and motivates the attendees. You say, you're all here because you are the best of the best. You're the best blue teamer, you're the best red teamer. We want you to work together and collaborate and more efficiently resolve some of the security issues we have here and make sure that our security posture improves. And then go over the flow of the exercise. Now it's time to actually do the exercise. We'll have, if someone from cyber threat intelligence is there, great. If not, the exercise coordinator or the red team could first present the adversary and say, we are in this space and we are likely to get attacked by this adversary. This adversary has done this, and this is how they accomplished it. These are their TTPs, their tactics, techniques, and procedures. That's what we're going to go through today. And then for each TTP, go through all the technical details. How does the procedure work? What tool did they use? What attack vector did they use? How was it delivered? What privilege did they gain? Then on step 2, you do the purple team discussion. This is a tabletop so far. At this point, you have the SOC folks say, okay, well, for that TTP, we should get endpoint logs sent over to our SIM. Or that might be blocked by our outbound proxy. Or our antivirus will be able to block that. And then the hunt team will say, well, even if it's not blocked, maybe we can get local logs from this particular system. Then the defer folks will say, well, if we grab memory, we'll be able to see that there's an active connection out to the internet that was started through run DLL 32, something like that. So you have this discussion, and of course the exercise coordinator is taking notes into what everyone assumes will happen when the exercise is ran. So next step is the red team will actually execute the TTP while showing it to everyone. They provide the attacker IP, the target IP, the exact time, and pretty much show everything that's happening. That way the blue team in this case is learning how an attacker works. And now step 4, it's time for the blue team to follow their processes and identify evidence of this attacker behavior. And monitor the time here because it's only the first TTP. You can't spend 3 hours on it. There's a lot more to go. So move along the exercise and make sure that you do catch these things. Now, I do want to give a shout out to Vector. Vector is a tool for managing red team and purple team engagements. So over here on the left, you see the red team case. In this case, they're disabling Windows anti-malware service. They have a technique, a phase, a command that they're going to run, the time they started it, the time that they stopped the attack, the attacker tool, the assets. And then on the right side, you have the blue team information. That the blue team did detect this. They detected it with McAfee. There was an alert around it. So you put the detection time there. You do this for each test case that you have, and you will be able to create some very cool reports later on how doing these exercises has improved you. You'll have historical diagrams on how when you first started, you only caught maybe 20% of these test cases, and later on, you caught way more. So step 5 of the flow is share the screen, show how the TTP was identified, if there were alerts, if there were logs, if there was forensics. document everything I just showed on the previous screen. The time that they detected it, and the time the alert came in, and then the red team stops that particular attack. Everyone shows the screen that the evidence stopped, and we can run that TTP again. Or if you can do any short-term adjustments, then do the short-term adjustments and test it out again. Have the red team repeat that TTP. This is why it's very important that the red team can repeat the same TTPs over and over to ensure that you are actually improving quickly and on the fly. And if something is getting alerted and the SOC person maybe didn't action it, then you know that you've actually just trained the people part or the process part. So you get value immediately as the exercise goes. The exercise coordinator will then document any feedback or action items, and then you do the same thing. You repeat this for the next TTP, and you go through that over and over for that particular day. And then you have your lessons learned. This is where your exercise coordinator really comes in. They're going to have minutes, they're going to have notes, they're going to have populated things like vector, they're going to have the action items, and they'll get feedback. They should send a daily email with a summary of what occurred during the day, what wins, what things didn't work as expected, because there will be a lot of things that don't work as expected. There's going to be a lot of assumptions that will be tested, and some will prove correct while some will not. And then you create this lessons learned document. Generally send this document within 2 weeks of concluding the exercise. Now, I mentioned SCYTHE, and one of the reasons why is that it is a purple team exercise framework and platform. It's enterprise grade, which allows you to create custom controlled synthetic malware that will run the same thing over and over consistently. So various techniques and capabilities that allow you to do this. It's an enterprise command and control framework, so you can test things like HTTP and HTTPS, DNS, SMB for lateral movement, Google Sheets, kind of like Carbonite did, Twitter, and Stego, all just from a communication perspective. And then, of course, the automation of being able to repeat this over and over, and you focus on really training and improving the people, the process, and the technology. There's a number of reports here, including HTML reports, CSV, MITRE ATT&CK mapping, and integration with enterprise products like PlexTrack, Splunk, really any SIM you have. We have Red Canary's atomic red team test cases that you can automate, and vector integration as well. We also have an SDK that allows you to really focus on creating new behaviors, either in Python code or native code, and we will be launching the marketplace next week, which is going to be an awesome event. So this is just a quick look at the architecture and how it works. We have a community and a marketplace creating TTPs. Then you bring them into your environment and you test them in production with a lot of automation and real-time views of what the SOC can see along with analytics. So just to show you a quick demo here of Vector. In here, we are in a SCYTHE demo, and I just want to show you APT33, which was imported from a SCYTHE campaign into here. So you can see here, APT33, this we ran on July 30th, and you can see everything this particular campaign did, and all our test cases are down here. So from the blue team perspective, you can click on any of these test cases, and the left side's already filled out for you. You would just have to fill out the right side as to what was detected. Now, the reason you want to use Vector is because of the reporting. So we can click here on reporting, and it's going to show us a number of different data points that are very easy to show your management how your adversary emulations have improved over time. So this is total metrics. This is how many test cases have been done, the percentage blocked, the percentage detected and not detected. You can also choose here per assessment. And you have this awesome thing here called historical trending. Here on the historical trending, you can see our first purple team engagement didn't really catch much. It had a really low detection rate. But as we've gone through, it has improved over time to where we are today. Obviously, many test cases done. Also, it has a heat map of MITRE ATT&CK to show what has been tested and what has been detected and what has not. So really interesting, all the reporting that you can do using Vector. It truly is one of the better tools for managing and showing value in red team and purple team engagements. So as I mentioned, we will have a free conference where I'd love to invite all of you and folks that you work with that are interested in purple teaming, because it's going to be awesome. We have 2 excellent keynotes as well as lightning talks. There's going to be a capture the flag. There's going to be an SDK launch and hackathon, and a lot of good and fun times. So free conference for training of your folks, August 20th. We hope to see you there. Here are the references that I mentioned. All of this has been done through years of work. It's not something we were able to do in one day. So shout out to all of that other work, and of course, anything that you would like to see. We're here and we're available. If you need help running your own purple team exercise, let us know. We actually will play the red team role for you. We have the platform that does it, and we'll be able to show and improve the people, process, and technology in your organization. So hopefully you've gotten a lot out of this. Purple team engagements are efficient ways of doing adversary emulations, and it's really where we are right now in the maturity model of ethical hacking. So thank you very much. I think we have a few minutes for questions. So if there are any, I'm happy to answer them, and please keep in touch. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks again to Tactical Edge, and have a wonderful day.